G'day and welcome to Big D Premier League Round 2 pre-match warm-up. I'm your host Noppers. Panel's with me tonight. I'll talk to them in a sec. We're talking about Saint-Mary-Église. Apologies to the French listeners for mangling that. I probably did a horrible job. But this is the map, and as you can see on the screen in front of you, the three central points there that they'll be contesting over, depending on which one randomly spawns, are Hospice, Saint-Mary-Église, and Checkpoint. As you can see there, there, and there. Wonderful penmanship skills there. Let's not judge. What I'll do now is just have a quick rundown on each of the points and a couple of key things about them. Righto, so the first one I'm going to talk about is Hospice up the top here of the map. And the one thing I want to point out straight away are the two, or the main supply route effectively, but these are the lines of advance that you're going to see enemy come in on. And then, of course, there's a third one from the bottom here, coming out of the city area, so that's actually quite critical as well. We'll get in and have a bird's eye view of that in a sec. And then the last part, although the top of the map up here is very open wide, this spot right here is a great place to put a garrison or OPs and advance into the south as well. But the main one I wanted to point out is that supply route that goes along there, and I'll tell you why shortly. And moving on to Saint-Mary-Église itself, and the obvious thing here is that it is a giant city area and that the point is offset slightly from the centre spine. Now, punters may say, oh, well, that's a bit of an advantage to the folks that spawn in out on this side here. That's not quite true. And the reason for that, well, there's a couple of reasons, actually. The first one is that a lot of this territory out here is a bit open, whereas the rest of it is quite closed. So whilst this side out here might get into the church and control the church, the other team's got all of this building infrastructure here to have a play with and get in on, and then of course around the back here as well. So there's quite a bit of cover there for them to approach and actually attack the point from. Now, if we see the other team actually win the point, of course, they're going to want to try and push for as far as they can, and then they've got no defensive or very little defensive line out this way. It's a very, very hard area there to fight, which means the enemy can also wrap around them and cut off their supply line at the back here. And that's the next point I would like to make about Saint-Mary-Église. It is definitely the hardest one of the 3 points to fight over because you've got all of these supply routes coming in here, up here. This is a supply route as well. I mean, technically that is. You can come in that way. It's just a hodgepodge of angles of attack and so hard for a 25-person squad, or set up rather, to defend against. Anyway, so that's Saint-Mary-Église. And the last one to look at, of course, is Checkpoint. Now, I watched NRD and OC have a scratch match the other day. They were practicing their tactics and things like that. It's a fascinating little area down here. The first one I'll point out is this main supply route that goes through the point and out to the other side, either way. That's going to be showcased very, very specifically shortly as to why it's so important. The next bit is this little block here. That's going to be crucial to the battle and as an attack line down there. And finally, we've got this giant wide open area down the bottom here. Great tank country. You've got to be careful down there, of course. Infantry can flank you. There's lots of bagage down here. But really good tank country compared to the other two areas. This one's definitely much wider when it comes to the terrain, but there's a lot of key points to use as you're advancing in onto the point. The last thing I'd like to point out for the eagle eyes amongst you is that the compass is not aligned to the map grid lines itself. That is, it's actually aligned with the magnetic variation at the time of map printing. What does that mean? It means that if I'm running through here and I call to my squad enemy in north, meaning there, and I haven't looked at the compass at the bottom of my screen as I'm running along, my team's going to be looking over there. That's quite critical when you get maps that are on a big angle like that, north sort of out that way, but it is a key factor when giving target indications. Let's get our zoom on now and have a bit of a look at the map itself from a bird's eye view. And we're starting at the south of the map there, south of where Checkpoint would be, Checkpoint being in this area here. So let's go for a bit of a zoomie and have a bit of a look. You can see lots of open terrain down there as mentioned before, and then we get into the checkpoint itself where all of the combat will actually occur trying to take the point. A couple of buildings just to the north here I mentioned before, we'll come back and talk about them soon. Now we zoom up over and have a look at Saint-Mary-Église itself, and you can see the church there on the right, and a bit of open terrain, and the open terrain around the back here that I was referring to, and zooming up through lots and lots and lots of buildings. And then finally up the top here we can see that we're coming up onto the hospice area now. This is hospice itself at this crossroad. Lots of building area to protect people as they come in. And then finally map edge on the north side. A bit of open country there for tanks that like to stay out in the open, but not a lot when compared to the south. Doing a bit of a reverse angle now and have a look-see from this direction, and you can see that giant cluster in the middle and the north here of all the buildings. But down the south they're quite barren, so you're relying more on the bushes and shrubs and the ground itself to protect you. Here, hand-to-hand fighting in the cities is always good fun and quite good. I'm going to take you on a little bit of a journey now about a couple of key points of terrain from a bird's eye view. The first one is starting at the checkpoint that's known as Rudigan Bosville, going through checkpoint itself and then out to Masonda Creek, which I think is Mansion on the Creek. Anyway, we jump down into this trench here, and it's wide enough for a vehicle to go through, but covers everything concealment and cover-wise from the sides. So you can move along there almost uncontested. You have to be careful, of course, because your head does stick above the parapet or the land itself. And importantly, where we're just coming into the point now, you'll notice that there's a good bird's eye view from up north into this area. But from the south, it's pretty well covered. Same thing out the other side, down the other road, shooting down out of the point. And we just have a look here. There's a bit of an oversight point there. And then a couple more little ones down here. They're a bit more closed. And then all the way back through to the back. That's important because what it means is that you can move people in along those two lines of supply, almost uncontested. The second thing I'd like to point out is this little area here, which I mentioned earlier. And if I'm hovering over the road right now and looking at the checkpoint capture point there, where these two brick walls are down here on the left and right in front of me, that's actually where the grid line starts for capturing this area. Now, you can actually get down here and shoot into those areas pretty well, but it's a great staging point up here, is to set your troops up to either push south or defend north, depending on whether you hold the point or not. So I see this as a key piece of terrain for either side to hold and fight over. Moving up to the next part, of course, which is Sainte-Mère-Église, and this here right in front of the church is the actual capture point. You'll see we're right in the middle of the circle now, in this spot right here. What does that mean? It means that holding the church gives you oversight over that area, but it is still in the open, and you've still got to actually do something about it. The church, however, is inside the circle, so either side have to capture the church to be able to hold this point. There's no question here, the church is the key piece of terrain. You do have a lot of different paths to move up on it from. For example, out here, down here there is some really good terrain because the ground is actually a lot higher in the middle than it is down here, so you can move up. There's doors in some of these buildings that allow you access, including up here. And then around the back here is a really good angle to approach from as well because of the brick walls are there. So the church, once you're in it, you're going to be hard to dig out of, but also you're going to be constantly fighting at the doors because people can approach you without you being able to see them. That's just how this works. So again, the key piece of terrain, I think, is this church and where the capture point is in front of that church. Welcome to the hospice part of the map. What we're looking at right here, where that little red car is roughly where the capture point is sitting centrally. And as we zoom back, of course, we can see all those buildings we mentioned before. What's key about this is that there are a number of approach paths, such as these tunnels here, for both sides to come into the point, main supply routes for both sides to come into the point, alternate angles to come into the point from, and then of course map north, which is heavily vegetated and allows for some level of sneakiness when moving in. What this means is that a very open road in the middle here is going to be quite heavily contested, and you need to get some engineers in there pretty quick, otherwise you're going to get shot.